Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Joining me in the studio this evening is Effie Samara, writer and academic. Welcome back to the programme, Effie.
Hi, Gordon.
Hi, welcome back. Now, we were supposed to be having Chris Stevens MP with us this evening as well, but apparently there is some difficulty getting a connection with Westminster tonight. So we'll try to get Chris, or maybe get Chris McCusker in if he can't be present. But anyway, I'm going to press on, Effie, with the usual coronavirus update first. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 727,476 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 702,850 were confirmed negative, 24,626 were positive. There are now 255 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. But there have been no reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. Now, of course, this is an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus displays the symptoms, and not all of those people with symptoms will be tested. But of the people who have tested positive, 73 were in hospital last night, 8 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have now died from complications caused by coronavirus, COVID-19 infection, now stands at 2,505. Now, this number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,788 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. And that's an increase of 11 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And now, if you would like to join the conversation here tonight, you can do so on Twitter by following us at BroadcastScot using the hashtag Scotland@7. And now to our first story this evening. The First Minister has announced financial support for those on low incomes affected by coronavirus measures. The Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, today said that additional restrictions aimed at tackling the growing spread of the novel coronavirus outbreak would almost certainly be imposed within days. The First Minister said that urgent action was needed, but that she hoped to avoid a full-scale lockdown along the lines of the one imposed in March. I need to be absolutely straight with people across Scotland. Additional restrictions will certainly be put in place over the next couple of days, she said. Ms Sturgeon also said that she would be announcing financial support for people on low incomes who experience financial difficulties because of self-isolation or coronavirus restrictions. The First Minister said that she had asked the British Government for an emergency COBRA meeting, which has been agreed for tomorrow morning. Well, Effie, I think all of us were expecting perhaps something more than this today. Did you expect the news to be worse, or do you think this is maybe just a delay until this COBRA meeting takes place tomorrow?
Well, I was quite shocked, to be honest with you, that Boris Johnson has disappeared again. We don't know if it's the Mediterranean or some other resort, but this is literally an emergency situation, and it is not one that we didn't know about. We've had 6 months to prepare for this, and he really ought to be there every day dealing with this emergency and ensuring that people at least are informed. Yes, it is unprecedented. It's a horrible thing. We've not had this at least in the last 100 years. So most of us are feeling very, very helpless. But at least in the position that he's in as the leader of an entire country, he really should have come out, I think, to make a proper statement. We have had the medical, obviously the Surgeon General and Dr. Whitty in England, and that's great, absolutely. But you need something, in my humble opinion, to come from the political leadership to guide you as to how we are going to be dealing and confronting this situation.
Effie, can I ask you, just expanding on what you were saying there a moment ago, we understand that the British government's scientific advisor and the medical officer are now being put in charge of giving new COVID briefings in London. And as far as I understand it, these are to be daily. But what's the significance, do you think, of the politicians seemingly handing this responsibility to the scientists? Is there more to it than just trying to be following the science? Are they trying to make some political point here?
Well, the political point was made months ago when they told us about the herd immunity strategy, wasn't it, Gordon? So there is something behind this. There is a big ideological perspective to this. And the problem here with the UK government, I think, is that whatever route or course, if you like, this unprecedented virus takes, we are to blame for it. So we are given a brief, and no, I'm probably going to step away from saying we, because that is the people in England are told what to do. That is, get back to work, go out, take the meal deal, use public transport, go out and party. Oh, hold on a minute. The virus has now hit. The R point is above 1.5. It's all your fault. So the two don't actually match. You have a complete cognitive dissonance. And for the people who are leading this discourse, they are not that naive. There is obviously a motivation behind all this.
So what you're saying...
The medical...
Sorry, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying then is that the government, having told people to get back to work, to go out to restaurants and eat, to go to the pubs and, socialise with their friends again, that the government is now turning around and blaming those individuals for the rise in COVID cases. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and they're not even. They're not even there. They're not even present to guide us. As to what the next steps are going to be. So they appoint two medical, very highly esteemed doctors to tell us the facts. But that's one side of the story. There's another side, there's another question that needs to be answered, which is, and now what?
Effie, it was suggested to me earlier today, before I came into the studio, one of the reasons why the British government has decided to shall we say, burden the scientists with this task of hosting these meetings is in part to show that they are not politicising the pandemic. In other words, they're having a go at Nicola Sturgeon as a politician for presenting the COVID-19 updates personally. Do you think there's something to that? Could they be trying to make a political point here?
It's all political. And obviously we know the facts are what they are, and anyone could revisit Nicola Sturgeon's briefings right across the last few months. She absolutely refused to engage in political debate or discourse in the course of these briefings and questions. So she never tried, in my knowledge at least, unless I've missed something, to make political capital out of of the COVID situation. It's actually the Tories who have not failed to politicize COVID in Scotland. They have not failed, not on one occasion. Every single week there would be a big tweet out by Jackson Carl or what have you, about how Nicola is politicising.
Yeah, Alistair Jack was making similar statements, I think, in the Telegraph today as well. Anyway, Effie,
yes,
I'd like to, if I may, move on to our next story this evening. And Glasgow MPs are calling for a fatal accident inquiry into refugee deaths. 7 Glasgow MPs have sent a letter to the Lord Advocate calling for a fatal accident inquiry to be held into the deaths of asylum seekers Adnan Walid Elbi, Badruddin Abdullah Adam and Mercy Baguma, who all died whilst in the care of the UK asylum system. The letter is signed by Glasgow MPs Chris Stevens, Stuart MacDonald, David Linden, Anne McLaughlin, Alison Hewlett, Patrick Grady and Carol Monaghan, and it calls for the investigation into the conditions of their accommodation and a financial support which MPs have described as Home Office sanctioned severe poverty at best and utter destitution at worst. Now, Effie, this is a subject which I know our other guests often Chris McCusker is gets very hot under the collar, but it's very close to his heart. Do you think that the British immigration system is treating asylum seekers in this way? Is it true that they're mistreating them to the point where they die in these circumstances?
The British immigration system does not exist. The Home Office has outsourced these duties to Serco MERS. So they are paying Serco some obscene amounts to the tune of £2 or £3 billion every year to ensure processing of applications, to ensure accommodation and meals for these people, to ensure the everyday activities, to ensure security and safety, to ensure health provision of health services. Now, we know after what happened to Mercy, after the abomination of that incident of a young woman being found dead from hunger right next to her baby, we know that this system is not simply failed. This system is probably one of the most terrible systems across the whole of Europe. This system, there is no supervisory, there is no review process, there is no supervision. Serco, yes, they do have a contract, but the contract is a very, very basic contract. They pretty much have freedom to do as they please, and they're doing very, very badly. And there is no scrutiny.
No oversight, so there is there's no recourse for any of these people if they're treated badly.
And so what you have is, I think what has today been instigated by Alison Thewlis and Chris and others is the least we can do, is of huge importance, because there needs to be a proper investigation into the processes of asylum and the ways that people seek recourse to safety, first of all, safety from torture, safety from death in some countries, safety from persecution. This is all part of the UN Charter and human rights, which the UK is a signatory to. So they are responsible. They must adhere to these terms, and they are failing. But because the Home Office is obviously, since the days of Theresa May, pretty much, the position has hardened to the point now of pure brutality. So, and the Scottish government have very little authority over this.
Yeah, I know there is a middle-aged Afghan man in Glasgow who's basically chained himself to a tree and sewn his lips shut, and is on hunger strike because of the way the British immigration system is wanting to send him back to Afghanistan after living in Scotland for over 12 years, working here, having a job. So it obviously is inhumane if people are going to such lengths to protest it.
I mean, you even have cases of children born in this country.
Yeah, being deported.
Are then, absolutely. And, going back to the wider issue of Windrush, you have people, who arrived here 60 years ago, and then they were just picked up and simply landed in Jamaica.
Okay.
I'm losing. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'd like to move on, if I may, Effie, to our next story. And that is that the UK is ending rail franchising as COVID measures have extended. The UK government has extended its multi-billion rescue deal for train operators with recovery contracts that will keep the railway running whilst ending the franchise system in what is called the biggest shake-up of the industry in 25 years. Emergency funding for rail companies has been agreed for periods from 6 to 18 months to help them get through the COVID-19 crisis as a first step towards an overhaul of the railway system. Under the new emergency arrangements, the Department for Transport will continue to cover rail companies' losses and pay them a fixed fee of up to 1.5% of operating costs before the pandemic. This is less generous than the previous 2%, and more heavily weighted to performance, such as punctuality, passenger satisfaction, and financial performance. Now, Effie, I know rail travellers are always moaning about the fact that rail fares constantly rise, and particularly rise for commuters. But the rail system in Scotland is a little different, isn't it? So how is the system in Scotland different? Does it make much difference, this franchise system here, do you think?
I'm not quite sure as to the operating details, Gordon. Maybe you might be good to fill me in. Is
Right.
this what you've just announced? The Scottish system is still going to operate under this franchise, or
Well, Scotland franchises its railways, but is supposed to be in public hands. So Scotland owns its railway trains, but franchises people to run them, as I understand it. So I
right?
guess
And do
this.
we know how this is going to affect, for example, services and fares? I understand this is something that they've not discussed yet. Is that right?
As far as I can make out from this report, it will allow the railways, the franchise holders at the moment, to continue services more or less as they are. But the government is only going to cover about 1.5% of their operating losses. So that will put pressure, I think, on ticket prices, almost definitely.
Yes, I think we may have someone on your left who
Have
may
we?
be able to enlighten us.
Hi, is that the other Chris?
Yes, it's the less famous Chris from the trade union group.
Hello, Chris. I'm glad you could join us. Thanks for stepping in tonight. We had trouble getting Chris Stevens due to the antiquated Westminster cable system. So what's your view of this, Chris? The railway franchise is ending but continuing at the same time.
Yeah, short and sweet answer is just basically get the railways fully developed in Scotland. We've no need to have any intervention from Network Rail. Get the infrastructure back into Scottish hands and get the jobs back in, basically to benefit Scotland Railways.
So you're in favour, Chris, really just renationalise the whole thing then, just get it back?
Oh, undoubtedly, Gordon, it's well overdue time for Scotland to actually be able to be in control. Take for example, the tragedy just outside Aberdeen.
Yes.
That railway track cannot get fixed until Network Rail fix it, and they can't. The investigation has got to be done by Network Rail. So you've got like 3 or 4 different bodies that are actually involved in that
Aye.
investigation. Where if we just had the railways in Scottish control, it would just be the 1 or 2 bodies.
And of course, the bodies would all be part of the one nationalised industry, so hopefully that would be a lot more efficient then, Chris, yeah?
Well, notwithstanding the fact that some people would be calling for a fatal accident inquiry,
Yeah.
which normally runs alongside if the various avenues are inconclusive and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But it's something that should be, should I say, autonomous from the Scottish Government. It should be run in conjunction with ScotRail. But we should have an oversight body to actually investigate these accidents without any, waiting for England to step in or, kind of like that bit of track because we've no photographed it and all that kind of caper.
Yeah, well, I remember, Chris, that after Better Together promised us that we would be getting all sorts of new powers. One of the powers which was meant to come to Scotland was power over health and safety. And I would assume in that transport would have been a part of that. Of course, that was ruled out in the Smith Commission report, so we never got it.
Yeah, well, but if you actually remember, Gordon, those two reports were not worth the paper that they were printed on, and you know that's been highlighted many times, and was even highlighted by one of the authors, a certain Murray Foot.
Well, listen, thank you, Chris, for helping with that particular element of this story. Now, we're returning to the news now. And Brexit's affecting UK citizens living in the EU who have been told that their bank accounts will be closed. Thousands of UK citizens living in the EU will have their British bank accounts closed by the end of the year because the UK's failure to agree a post-Brexit trade deal. Lloyds, Barclays and Coutts have informed their retail and business customers that they will lose their accounts before or when the Brexit transition period ends on the 31st of December, and more banks are expected to follow suit. Lloyds Banking Group, which includes Halifax and Bank of Scotland, has contacted its 13,000 customers in the Netherlands, Slovakia, Germany, Ireland and Portugal, warning them that they must make alternative arrangements as the bank is no longer allowed to offer services. A spokesperson said, "We have written to a small number of customers living in affected EU countries to let them know that due to the UK's exit from the EU, regrettably, we will no longer be able to provide them with some UK-based banking services. We want to keep customers informed and advise on the next steps." Financial services in the UK can currently trade across the European Economic Area because member countries are bound by the same regulatory framework. The arrangement, known as passporting, expires at the end of the year, and the UK government has legislated so that EU banks can continue to provide services for customers in the UK. The EU has not done the same. Unless a trade deal is agreed with the EU, UK financial institutions will have to abide by often arcane rules, which vary from country to country and depend on what services are being offered and by what kind of bank. Last week, the Dutch National Bank confirmed that UK banks will no longer be able to provide current or savings accounts to retail customers in the Netherlands. Customers who bank with firms that own EU-based subsidiaries are having their accounts transferred, but banks that do not have an EU arm would have to apply for a license to trade in each EEA country. Some banks have too small a customer base in the EU to justify the cost. Effie, now this is an interesting story. Many months ago, in fact, I guess at the time when Brexit was actually voted upon, many people predicted that this would happen, that British nationals, or expats as they sometimes like to call themselves, living abroad, who were all gung-ho for Brexit, didn't seem to realise that they were like turkeys voting for Christmas.
That does happen, Gordon, and we have a name for this in academia. It's called the colonial spirit.
Ah.
So, it's, I suppose, a conceptual framework, a way of thinking of yourself as quite superior. And as you have rightly said, so many British residents in Spain went out and voted for Brexit, thinking that things wouldn't change. Anecdotally, I remember not a friend. It was someone that I knew. He was actually in the motor industry. And he I was just having a conversation with him that week, that eventful week, Brexit week. And I said, so how did it go for you? And he said, I'm absolutely delighted. I voted for Brexit. And I said to him, well, didn't you say that you were saving up to get a house in Spain? And then he said to me, of course I am. What do you mean? And I said, well, how are you going to go about it now? Because things are going to change. And you can probably guess what the answer was. He said to me, well, I'm British. Who's going to stop me? So
his own bank, probably.
Precisely. So as you said it, you said it all in that report. Economic regulations and banking law is very, very complex, and obviously the EEA framework for banking is very, very rules based. So you have to abide by that regulatory framework to enable yourself to offer X, Y, and Z services to your customers. the banks who don't have enough of a customer base, they won't be able to do that because it won't satisfy it won't make sense.
Yeah,
The
the cost
cost
would be
is
too
going to be
high.
far too high.
Yeah.
So what do you know? More headaches.
Okay, thanks, Effie. Chris, do you have any sympathy for these British expats who might be complaining that the bank accounts are going to end up having to change to European ones?
I don't have any sympathy for any expat in inverted commas. I mean, years and years and years ago, I actually filled out a residencia to become a citizen of Lanzarote.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Sadly, though, my ex-wife decided otherwise at the last minute. But before you filled out your residencia, you had to have a bank on the island or on mainland Spain.
Uh-huh.
You had to have a bank account. There was no disbarment to have a British bank account as well, but they expected your wages that you earned on the island to be paid into a Spanish bank. Uh,
Okay.
there are people that will be uh, uh, left out in a limb, shall we say.
Yeah.
But the banks have been in and out of the news recently, and I've seen an article earlier on this morning with regards some financial irregularities with HSBC.
Yeah. We'll be coming to
Uh,
that later on, Chris.
surely, surely we shouldn't be surprised about that.
Well, listen, we will be talking about that later in the programme, Chris, in fact, just in a moment, because our next story is about exactly that. Tory cash for access donations have been linked to a Putin-supporting oligarch. Leaked files, which show that the husband of Lubov Chernukin, who has donated £1.7 million to the Tories, including playing to pay tennis with Boris Johnson and David Cameron, received $8 million or £6.1 million from a politician facing US sanctions due to his closeness with the Kremlin. Her lawyers said the donations are not tainted by Kremlin influence. The leak of banks' suspicious activity reports, called the FinCEN files, show that Volodymyr Chernukin was sent the money in 2016 from British Virgin Islands company linked to Suleiman Kerimov. Now, Kerimov is a member of the upper chamber of the Russian parliament. He's been under investigation in France for over allegations of tax fraud since 2016, and in 2018 he was sanctioned by the US authorities, who were targeting those who they said played a key role in advancing Russia's malign activities. Mr. Chernukin, who was a deputy minister of finance under Vladimir Putin before leaving Russia for London in 2004 after being sacked by the president. The Chernukins now both have British citizenship and live in London. So this is the first, I think it's safe to say, or the tip of a very large iceberg, according to the 2,500 pages of these reports which have been released to the press. What are we to make of this? Isn't it a surprise that Russian supporters of the Conservative Party have been named in this report into these shady deals?
Well, it isn't. The Tory party at the moment is compromised to the Russians. We know this. Russians enabled Brexit to a very, very large extent. Russians are also supporting Trump. They are enabling far-right activity across Europe, including Marine Le Pen, including in the Netherlands. And in Germany and Austria, they're supporting the Orban regimes. They are supporting the Polish far-right regime. So none of this is new, Gordon. What is interesting here is that this has been going on for about 10 years. And we've spoken about this on the program before. there's been a number of individuals of highly suspect activity, and we have named some names which have been in the papers, including Dimitri Firtash, including the Chinukans, including obviously Lord Lebedev now.
Yeah.
Who is also a very personal friend of Boris Johnson's.
And
So
yes.
no news there, but highly worrying.
Okay, thanks, Effie. Chris, what's your reaction to this story that we now seem to be seeing some proof, if it were needed, that that some of the money which is coming into the Conservative Party is less than clean?
Less than clean. That's a diplomatic way to put it, Gordon. We just to point out that the Scottish Tories are not untainted in this, because I believe one of the uh, idiosyncrasies of this story is that the wife of the Russian oligarch paid £120,000 in order to have lunch with Ruth Davidson. But then
Wow.
that then
Most
leads us into,
expensive date in the world.
well, yes, you know, that leads us into the whole issue that Peter Gagan covered a couple of weeks ago on the Friday night Scotland at 7 with
Yep.
Kenny, where he went into the dark money, which is heavily linked into East Renfrewshire Conservatives. And it's got heavy links across the water to the DUP. You know, these are not allegations; these are proven facts. You know, when electoral goings on are allowed to be manipulated by money, then you know, serious questions have to be asked. Excuse me, not just of the fact that there's there's electoral money floating about, but what is the involvement of the Electoral Commission that can choose to overlook
Yeah.
the rules and regulations which surround the level of money that a candidate is allowed to have at any one given time in order to fight an election?
Well, listen, Chris, hold on to that thought for a moment because there is more on this story coming up. Now, banks had also allowed millions in suspicious transactions despite warnings, according to these leaked documents. Britain's largest bank allowed millions of dollars to be sent around the world by scammers, despite being warned by regulators, according to the leaked files. HSBC allowed some $80 million, £62 million proceeds of a Ponzi scheme to move to accounts in Hong Kong in 2013 and 2014 via a US business. It's one revelation is one of many contained in the so-called FinCEN files, leaks published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and its partners on Sunday night. HSBC had already been fined $1.9 billion over money laundering before the Ponzi scheme transaction. It said that it met its legal duties regarding such activities, the BBC has reported. The FinCEN files leaks concern more than $2 trillion transactions in total and centre on more than 2,000 suspicious activity reports submitted to the US Financial Crimes Investigation Network, or FinCEN, between 2000 and 2017. All suspicious transactions made in US dollars to the United States or otherwise must be reported to the body. London has been battling a reputation of being a haven for so-called dirty money, with criminals and oligarchs slipping through the regulatory cracks using anonymous UK-registered companies. Effie, this seems, I know we talk about this kind of thing a lot, but now we're really seeing, I think, clear evidence now that British banking institutions are heavily involved in this. And the idea that shell companies registered in British tax havens are being used to channel this money and to launder it before it goes on into other bank accounts. What on earth can the Can anybody do to stop this, though? There seemed to be no authority with any teeth to clamp down on this, well, apart from the Americans, perhaps.
Well, I don't know if you remember, Gordon, yourself, or perhaps Chris might remember. It was about 8 years ago, I think, when the Obama administration was looking to fine or press criminal charges, I believe, against HSBC. And it was good old George Osborne who wrote to the Obama administration to discourage this kind of thing. So people watching now, they can please do look it up, because I remember it very, very, very vividly. Now, let's not forget, London is the greatest offshore club in the world. So,
Yep.
people who wish to launder funds, be it from China via the Emirates, US, the Middle East, they will, or even North Africa, they will use London, and be it via Panama or the Jersey or Guernsey or the City of London. We are talking about billions and billions of pounds of unregulated funds, whose movement is facilitated through the City of London quite relatively easily, actually. Yeah. And that is why you're seeing all that activity, the Russian funds coming through. And now, with the FinCEN report, I'm personally not at all shocked, because I've obviously been following this both from an academic and political interest point of view. But we know how the City of London was built. And going back to HSBC, again, I would encourage people to look up the history of HSBC. It was founded and instituted on the proceeds of opium being trafficked into China. And this is quite well known. So there's a big history there, and it ain't going to stop anytime soon.
Thanks, Effie. That's a wonderful history lesson there. Chris, this is a subject I know which probably would anger you as much as it angers many of our other viewers. What I was going to ask you was the fact that this dirty money seems to be coming through unchecked. I seem to remember that it was one Gordon Brown, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, who heavily deregulated financial dealings. Am I right? Was it Gordon Brown who helped to facilitate this?
It certainly was, yeah. And what we have to point out here is the fact that this is a global issue. This runs from Europe to Asia, into South America, and then into America itself. I read earlier on today there was a certain Chinese national who actually started an investment scam called WCM 777. And he was basing himself in Los Angeles, operating out of Los Angeles. And at the time in America, he called himself Dr. Phil. And he was posing as some sort of reverend for evangelical churches. And throughout all this, sort of like, how could you call it? Walter Mitty type sort of like activity. Basically making up seminars on Facebook and webinars on YouTube and stuff like that. He managed to raise an incredible 80 million and, just selling investment opportunities. So, it shows you that it's really, really badly regulated, and it really needs to be clamped down on. What part of the Brexit argument was that if Britain became an independent state, they would regain all the banking fiscal autonomy, and we would be self-regulating. However, what they didn't point out is the fact that what the Tories really wanted to do was actually turn Britain into a tax haven to allow these people to come here and actually deposit their money.
So basically making money for nothing then, Chris?
Basically making money for nothing, yeah.
Okay, well listen, let's leave that story there for the moment, and more More government shenanigans, I suppose you could say. In our next story, the UK government is planning an all-male team to host the COP26 UN Climate Summit. Now, the UN is fielding an all-male team to host a vital UN climate summit next year, flouting international norms and angering activists and observers who say the lack of gender balance imperils progress on key issues. All the politicians who will host COP26 talks for the UK in Glasgow are men, from the Business Secretary Alok Sharma, who will act as president of the summit, to his team of climate and energy ministers, Lord Callanan, Zach Goldsmith and Kwasi Kwarteng, who have represented the UK in recent online meetings. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, will also take prominent roles in the conference set for November 2021, after it was postponed due to the COVID-19 crisis. At COP26, countries must come up with strengthened commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions if the goals of the landmark Paris Agreement of 2015 are to be fulfilled. The First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, will welcome world leaders to the talks, but has no formal standing in the negotiations. A spokesperson for the First Minister said women and girls around the world are on the front line of the fight for climate justice, and the UK government's implicit failure to acknowledge that speaks volumes about its own attitudes. Although it is perhaps not surprising, coming from a government which has made it clear its intent to flout diplomatic and legal norms and to break international law. Now, Effie, this is an excellent topic for you, I feel. This is an issue of women being absent from these climate talks. What on earth is the government thinking? Why do they not want women at these climate talks?
To be honest with you, I would not want to be in the same room as Zach Goldsmith or Sharma. But anyway, jokers to one side, Gordon. This is basically showing you, this is evidences this government's both ideological reality, but also the practice of their governance, what they want to do and how they're seeking to do it. They are an authoritarian, misogynistic setup who are there to take us back to the Victorian times and openly disregarding the fact that women have been at the forefront of, if you're talking climate, of the particular debate. Going from Greta Thunberg, who is a child, and such an enlightened child, and regardless of what anyone may think, she was brave enough to do what she did and put herself out there and be received very graciously, even by Bercow in the Parliament in Westminster and other world leaders. Now, also Nicola Sturgeon has also been at the front of this debate. She has not only encouraged, but she has also committed funding to the climate issue, to renewables. And she continues, her and her government are continuing to do this. And it is beyond unacceptable. It's not even, Root doesn't even cover it, that a country is hosting this and the country's leader is not playing a formal role in the in this summit. But you only have to go through the names. Sharma, Goldsmith. There you have it. Goldsmith couldn't get a seat in Richmond, and he bought himself one in the House of Lords. So I'm angry.
Oh, I'm not surprised, Effie. Chris, what's your view of this? I mean, here we have what seems like a gang of middle-aged, well-fed billionaires, presumably going to lecture everybody about climate change and leaving half the world's population out of it, it seems.
Well, yes, but not only that, they're also leaving out Jacinda Ardern. Also going to leave out Angela Merkel. Effie was quite right to point out that women have been at the forefront of the calls for climate change. I would possibly gently correct Effie insofar as I think Greta is nearly what you could describe as a young woman now. and she has an excellent grounding, gave herself an excellent grounding,
Yeah.
throughout all these various platforms that she's been afforded throughout the world in order to highlight this issue. And for women to be marginalised, or young women, to go back to, quite correctly, as Effie said, the Victorian age of where men will debate the serious issues and women shall not be heard,
Yeah.
is an absolute affront to how modern democracy should be. And again, I'll just augment exactly what Effie said about the fact that it just shows you how misogynistic and out of date this Westminster right wing cabal is.
Okay. Chris, thank you for that. Well, perhaps Nicola Sturgeon might want to invite Greta Thunberg as a guest of honour and maybe to address the people of Glasgow outside of that. Who knows? Anyway, on to our next story now. And actually, this is linked, of course, to the last one. You may have escaped your attention, but this is actually Recycle Week. The Environment Secretary, Rosanna Cunningham, is reminding everyone of the importance of recycling to Scotland's green recovery. The green economic growth after coronavirus COVID-19 is at the heart of the recently announced programme for government, with £70 million being earmarked to improve waste and recycling infrastructure as a part of it. This major investment is one of a number of initiatives planned to help increase recycling and to build a circular economy. These include Scotland's Deposit Return Scheme, which is expected to capture 90% of single-use aluminium and steel cans, glass and plastic bottles, and the introduction of legislation to increase the minimum price of carrier bags from 5p to 10p. Effie, here's a good subject. I'm sure this is something which is totally uncontroversial for most of us, I think, in Scotland, that this is a great idea.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it obviously varies across the different councils. But up here, we've got a very strict regime of separating things, and we've got 4 different bins, and it's it's fantastic that money is being spent on educating people on the importance of this, because you're talking about fantastic differences being made to things like timber and minerals and water supply. So this goes right across the board. And obviously what we're seeing with the situation with the plastic in the oceans and the appearance of it even in the fish population and things like that, and it completely then affects the food chain.
Yeah.
So it's in everything and every activity that we undertake as humans on a daily basis. It should really be at the forefront of our thoughts. It's a huge, big issue, and I would urge every viewer. And I'm not saying don't buy things and don't help the economy, although expansionist economy is not quite my thing. But every time you buy something, just be aware that this thing will eventually have to be disposed of. So, it's a chain that we're all affected by, ourselves and our children. And it's a huge concern. So, yeah, let's all get into it. Recycle Week.
Okay, thanks, Effie. Chris, you and I are probably old enough to remember taking iron brew bottles round to the corner shop when we were kids to make a bit of pocket money. Could this see a new sort of a rise in this activity among Scotland's children, do you think?
Well, I would sincerely hope so. And I think it was last week, Gordon, that I alluded to the fact that we were talking about an article regarding the Highlands and Islands, and sort of like trying to reduce and minimise the packaging in shops
Yeah.
and stuff like that, whether it's like down to your butter, your cooked meat, your cheese. I mean, even your fish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you used to go to fishmonger, it would just get it in a bit of paper. And there was a couple of times I remember that paper ending up in your Wellington boots in order to dry them out. So, I mean, you're having to think constantly, about the packaging that you're handling. And as Effie quite rightly said, in Glasgow, I don't know where Effie lives, but certainly in East Renfrewshire, we've got 4 bins. You've got
Yeah.
your general purpose, you've got your cans, tins, plastic bottles, you've got cardboard, you've got your garden waste, and also your food waste.
Yeah.
To go off to compost. So I mean, we are. When I say that we're doing as much as what we can at the moment, I personally think that other people could do better
Yeah.
at it. I mean, actually, at the moment, sitting with me here is I've got a bag of used batteries, which I should have actually taken down to Aldi's today, because they've got a massive big bin there
Yeah.
that you just put your batteries in. So, I mean, even thinking about that, you just have to sort of like catch yourself and sort of like say, I need to do that.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, thank you both for those answers. We're coming to a final story this evening, so you'll have to forgive me if I manage to mispronunciate. I can't even mispronunciate. I'm going to mispronunciate a lot of Gaelic words for you now. Now, an MSP is launching a community forum on the future of Gaelic. The SNP MSP for Nanelan and Alistair Allen has launched a series of community conversation on Gaelic's future as a community language in the Outer Hebrides, Skye and Tiree. Consultations will establish an open forum to discuss and determine appropriate actions in securing the future of the language within the islands. The recent publication of a comprehensive socio-linguistic study into the use of Gaelic in the vernacular island communities, titled The Gaelic Crisis in the Vernacular Communities, concluded that the language will fall into obsolescence unless significant changes are made in approach and strategy. The MSP is working with the authors of the study from SILSA research team based at the University of the Highlands and Islands and a cross-party group of fellow politicians. 9 community meetings are planned to take place in the late autumn across Nanelan, Sair and Skye and Tiree to engage the island residents and organisations. Residents will also have the option to submit written opinions as part of the process. As well as discussions about Gaelic usage in home and community, the meetings will gauge the opinions on whether the Gaelic community cooperative, Uras nan Gaelic, could be an appropriate structure to coordinate and drive forward local development actions under the direct control of the Gaelic-speaking community. Now, I have to say, and I apologise profusely to my Gaelic viewers for my dreadful mispronunciation of just about every word in that report, but let me talk to you first, Effie. The Gaelic language is a part of our culture, and despite my inability to speak it, needs to remain that way. Surely this must be very valuable, a valuable report indeed.
Well, this was one of my lockdown big achievements. I managed to begin to teach myself Gaelic. So I had incorrectly imagined that because I speak quite a lot of languages, that would be quite easy, but it hasn't been. Right. So I will forgive you, Gordon. It's not easy, you know. But back to your news item. It's for me, this is obviously of a very personal interest. Linguistics is part of what I do, and the value of not simply preserving but ensuring the continuation of languages is not just about helping, obviously ensuring the richness and the intellectual wealth and the cultural wealth of the people who speak it, but it's also enriching the intellectual wealth and the cultural wealth of all of us. If a language, and when a language disappears, a lot of wisdom, to put it simply, disappears with it.
Yeah.
So we must do all that we can to maintain this. There are tens of thousands of people in Scotland who do speak Gaelic. It's very, very important to them. And colonising a place linguistically as it has happened with English over the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
And this is not simply in relation to the Gaelic languages and the Irish Gaelic and the Scottish Gaelic. It's also, pretty much all over the world where English imposed itself. And English, for all my love for it, and I have, I'm a student of Middle English, of medieval English. I write, so this isn't anything to do with a distaste. It's in fact about enriching every single language. So I personally and wholeheartedly welcome this, and long may it continue. And please wish me luck on this journey, because Gaelic's not easy.
No, it isn't. I can attest to that. I tried it on Duolingo and gave up after 3 weeks. Chris, what's your reaction to this? I don't know whether you have a connection with Gaelic or not. Chris, is there a connection between you and this language?
There is not. I only have a connection, a very loose connection to the Irish Gaelic, which is, slightly different from Scots Gaelic. But I mean, this is where I've got to sort of like give in and sort of like sit in awe at Effie's knowledge of various languages. I only speak one other language, and that's Italian, and that's just after years of being spoken to by a family uncle. And he would only speak to me in Italian in order that I learned it. So, like many, I only know. I think it's Shishmahawk.
You're asking the wrong man, Chris.
Well, I actually believe it's a swear word. I think it's shut or something or other.
Okay.
There was always the BBC. Long before BBC Alba, there was a program on called Haggis Haggis.
Yes, I remember that one. Yeah.
And it was an educational sort of like program
Yes.
in order to get sort of like conversational Gaelic and sort of like introduced into your diction. And it always struck me quite funny, because although I say that I only speak Italian, it's actually I remember years ago I used to work for Safeway, and I opened the first Welsh-speaking store in Carnarvon in North Wales, and I was actually sent to school at night in order to learn conversational Welsh. So if you want to ask me where the jam is, I've got no problem in telling you.
I'll bear that in mind, Chris.
How to answer the telephone, and that's absolutely fine. But
Chris, the next time I'm in Wales, I'll get you to coach me before I go down. Well, listen, we have sadly come to the end of a very interesting programme this evening. So I'd just like to thank my guests, Chris McCusker, for stepping in at the last minute, and of course, Effie Samara, for being there from the beginning and helping me get through this programme. Now, of course, at this time of the evening, it's also my job to ask you to help us, because Broadcasting Scotland needs your support all the time. We operate basically because of you. So if you'd like to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so by following the prompts on your screen now. And in the meantime, that is it from me this evening here at our Broadcasting Scotland studio. I will be back again on Thursday, but from all three of us here in the studio tonight, a very good evening to you.